Hey weirdos, so welcome back to my channel. My name is EmmaAbe and today I'm very excited to be filming my June wrap up. I also rebraided these three braids and they look very nice. The bits close to my root were looking pretty gross in the past couple of videos and they were really bugging me, so I'm really happy that I rebraided them. Anyway, so I read 8 books this month. This month was a bit of a reading slump for me because I wasn't in a great headspace. I was dealing with a lot of mental health crap, and I was also like working like full-time for a bit, so it was just like it was really crazy. So I only got to 8 books, but that's okay. I felt like every book I was reading, it was just like a slog to get through. Not that any of these books were bad, because I don't think I read any bad books. It just, that's how I was feeling. Okay, anyway, let's get started with the first one, and that is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I don't think I've read anything by Holly Black. I read this because The Wicked King, the second book in the series, won the Goodreads Choice Awards, and I don't remember what category. I can look it up. It's in here somewhere. YA, fantasy, and sci-fi. That's what it won. Well, that took me forever to find that out. Honestly, it was just kind of like a meh book. I feel bad in saying that, but also I don't really think it's the genre that I am into. I don't really understand fairy, whatever the heck is going on with that. That is never something I've understood in YA fantasy settings. I think I am way more partial in my fantasy. Not that I've read a lot of fantasy into the more akin to a Tolkien-esque thing. I did think that having the whole connection between it being like a modern setting and then the fairy world being two separate things, I thought that was interesting. At least I haven't really seen that done before, but I'm gonna give The Wicked King a shot because that's the whole reason why I read this book. And then after that, if I don't like that, I'm not going to continue reading the series. I do know there's another book out there. I have heard a lot of people saying that The Wicked King is better than The Cruel Prince, so I'm thinking that's good. I mean, I did like the main character. I don't remember what her name is. I did find her to be feisty, and I really liked the interesting dynamic between her and her father. Or not really her father, her like adoptive father. That was really interesting because of the trauma that he had done to her. I was getting confused a lot with like who exactly the Cruel Prince was. I thought he was this one person for like so long, and then I was like, oh, well, no, it's this other person. I'm trying to give it like a star rating. I think I'm gonna give it a 3 because it was just like mad book. I personally wasn't too invested in it. Next book I read was Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. Oh my god, I love this. This was so much fun to read about. It was just like the chaotic energy of the book that was like consistent was pretty cool. I loved hearing about these like all of these freaking rules that went into like who you could date and who you could not, and they're not like set rule, they're all like social, and I thought it was a really interesting exploration into the world of Singapore. And Singapore is not something that like I'd known too much about or anything like that, so it was really interesting to get a glimpse into this lifestyle that I do not think I will ever have. And I thought it was so interesting, and I loved learning about the history of the people, and I literally loved the gossip sessions that all these like old women with like, not old women, but like all like the mothers of like the marrying age people would all like come together and like gossip about each other. I ate that stuff up. It was so funny. It was so enjoyable. I didn't really care too much like for the plot in general. Like the plot could have been anything and I still would have enjoyed it as much. I did think it was a really interesting like exploration that the main character goes through, and she has to think about that her relationship with her boyfriend, who's someone that she loves, she's been with, that if they were to be together it would mean him sacrificing like his family. And that's a big thing. especially for Chinese people and like the Chinese culture in general. Your family is like number one, especially your parents. Filial piety is huge there. And it's something that gives me anxiety, honestly. It just hit me in a really real place. That anxiety is really there. And I just really liked it. And I think you guys should go read it because it was such a fun, enjoyable read. And I kind of want to watch the movie now. I'm just very curious. I just had so much fun reading it. So I think I'm gonna give this like a 4-star because again, I think there's just sometimes you're just inundated with so much information. It's hard to keep track of like who is who's related to who. But yeah, it was so good. Like I was looking up family trees to try and keep everything straight and how everyone was connected to each other and related to each other. But otherwise, it was really good. Next is a book I can't talk about because I'm judging it for the BookTube prize. So sorry if you wanted to see my thoughts, but at the end of July, you should be hearing my thoughts about that. I also only have 2 more books to read for the BookTube prize. Oh, I also wanted to say for The Cool Prince and for Crazy Rich Asians, I read those with the audiobook and not following along because libraries kind of be shut down. Next I read was Breathe a Letter to My Sons by Imani Perry. I did not strategically time this at all. It was literally a book that was checked out for me at my library. It was in the running for the BookTube prize. It was eliminated in the first round. So it is kind of similar to like Dear Girls, which I read a bit ago, but way different. Letter to My Sons, Breathe a Letter to My Sons is all about the author writing to her sons who are going to be Black men in American society, which if you guys have been paying attention to the news at all, isn't exactly the most privileged of positions to be in, to say the least. This book was written last year, you know, before really the racial injustice and police violence was really in the forefront of everyone's mind. I find it mind-boggling to think of how people could have not understood that this was going on, given the prevalence of police violence, especially against people of color in this country. Like, how can you watch the news and not understand what's going on? I don't know. Say my piece on that book. This book was written with so much love and care, and you can see that coming through when she reads it because of how she talks about like certain things and the urgency that comes through with how she talks about it. It's because she really loves her sons and she wants to make sure that they can be as safe as they can be within society. And it just was a very humbling read, and it was very short. So I would recommend you read this if you want a more insider view into the Black experience coming from a woman talking to her sons. I enjoyed it. I thought it was very good. I think it's sad that it was eliminated, but you know, we're in the quarterfinals right now of the BookTube prize, and all of the books were really strong, really strong. I think it's unfortunate that it isn't here anymore, but there are so many good books in the BookTube prize that it's just something has to go. Read it. It's one of those good books that would be good to add to like your anti-racism list of books that you should read. And it's short too, so if you guys want any like short books. I think the audiobook was like 5 hours long or something like that. I'm also going to give that one a 4 out of 5. The next book I read was Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I can't pronounce names. You guys all know this. I thought it was cute. I thought it was enjoyable. It's a cute little interracial relationship, and it's also long distance. Things that like I have been looking for in romances. It's a contemporary, and I read this for the Summer of Contemporary Readathon that I've been hosting. I like that they're older. They're like, you know, post-college age, because I think if this was happening like when they were in high school, it'd be a little bit weird. Just feels a lot more adult than the typical like YA novel is, especially when it comes to contemporary. It's a nitpick I have, and it really bugs me, is why the fuck are they emailing each other? Okay, like, I don't get that. I will never understand that. They do text each other. They do that. But why do they email each other? I don't understand. I understand that they want to shoehorn in the whole, like, email thing at the end, like the email server thing, but that is very, like, shoehorned in and over really fast. I did not like that. I thought that was kind of stupid. I thought that there are better ways to write in the way how their relationship is outed to the world. I really liked the two main characters. I thought that they were cute. It took me a while to warm up to the president's son, because I thought for a while that he was self-absorbed, arrogant in terms of how he spoke about himself. He got better. I warmed up to it. I'm gonna give it a 4 again. I'm giving out lots of 4s. I have lots of questions about the practicality of the relationship. Touch on in the book that in order for the two of them to be together, one of them would have to give up basically their dream, or try and find a different outlet for their dream and try and transform it into something else. And I think that that is a valid conversation to have, and that should definitely be having a conversation with someone, because, I mean, when you marry into the royal family, it's kind of like you're married into the royal family and that's your job now. You kind of can't do what you used to do and what you wanted to do. I was a little bit disappointed with how that was handled, because I thought that that was a really interesting idea and they completely glazed over it. I feel like that's a lingering plot hole that I have so many questions about, because they just pretend like this other person can continue doing what they want to do. And I'm just like, that's not how that works. It'd be one thing, this other person, the president's son, wanted to be a baker. I think that that is a pretty achievable dream if you're married into the royal family. But being an American politician, I don't know how feasible that is. I have lots of questions, legal ramifications of that, the political ramifications. I have lots of questions, and I think that it would be so interesting to see that explored. I wanted to see that explored more. Otherwise, it was cute. If you don't mind those things, then it's a cute story. I do wish there was more Spanish in it. I think there could have been more exploration as to President's son's like Mexican identity and how that intersects like with his relationship, because that there is an intersection there. It's a interracial relationship. In interracial relationships, your race, your cultures, their differences are going to come up. And those things do come up, but they don't come up in terms of like his Mexican identity. It just comes up in terms of like their American identity versus their English identity. And I think that's a little bit of a disservice. When you're biracial, I'm not biracial, finding your identity is harder. Finding your racial and your cultural identity is harder. And you're not just American, you know, you're not just Mexican either. I think that there could have been more exploration into how those two identities intersect. Next one I read is Darwin Comes to Town, How the Urban Jungle Drives Evolution by Menno Stitchelson. I'm sorry. This one I thought to be very interesting. I enjoyed it. It's a very sciencey book, and it is not a sciencey book that I'm typical of reading. You know, I'm very used to evolution books, like looking at species in the wild, but this looks at the creatures and the species that we interact with almost on a daily basis. You know, it looks at the rats, it looks at the flies, it looks at the squirrels, all things that are in an urban setting, and it looks at how the urban environment, how humans, we have, through our development and our urbanization and our modernization and our technological developments, have altered evolution for certain species. I was not expecting that when I walked into this book. I didn't know what it was. I was like, Darwin, it's probably science. Why not? Let's just pick it up, read it. And I was blown away. It was so interesting. Some of the parts were dry. I'm not gonna lie. It was hard to get through at some points. I loved going through the case studies of these different animals and looking at how you can have disparate populations of like the same species within city blocks, within buildings, even within rooms, depending on the species. It's so interesting. So if you're interested in that, that is a book that I would highly recommend. I don't really have anything else to say about it because it was just really fascinating, because it takes looking at evolution the way we are typically used to it and looking at how we are changing it. And I learned some things about evolution that I didn't really. We tend to think of evolution as something that happens over a vast stretches of time, when this book kind of shows that it doesn't have to take that long. The next book I read is the only physical book I read this month, and that is The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. I really enjoyed it. I felt like I know this person. I know the main character. Like, personally, I have friends with autism who are like this, and it felt like that Mark Haddon just put their brain on the page. So good. I really loved it. That takes a complicated family relationship dynamic and it explores it through this autistic person's mind. And it deals with like the struggles of trying to understand like what exactly is going on when you're not neurotypical. It explores it through this case of this dog that was found murdered at the beginning of the book. The secrets that the main character was able to uncover, and how he dealt with it. It was fascinating, and I loved it. I am so glad that this was like required reading sometimes in classes. This is actually required for my brother to read, and I stole his copy of it. This is mine now. The school hasn't asked for it back, so it's mine now until they yell at us to give it back. Highly recommend this. I mean, they think this is like the one that got a 5-star for me because I just loved it. The biggest thing that impressed me so much about this book is that the author really was able to take a mind of an autistic person and put it on the page. And granted, autism is a spectrum, so this isn't going to be every single person's experience who has autism, but it is a way to show you what it can be like. And one thing that I think can help neurotypical people is it shows you, not by directly telling you, but it shows you things that could be helpful when dealing with an autistic person, which I think is great. And I've learned some things, and I'm just very happy in reading this. The last book I read is Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. This is another book that I read for the Summer of Contemporary Readathon, as well as this was. I think it's cute. I think it's fun. It's fine. It's harmless. Again, what the fuck is up with the emails? I don't know, it felt very juvenile for me. I feel like I'm past like that phase in my life. I've moved past that like weird angsty puberty phase in my life. I feel like I'm looking for more like mature themes or just mature relationships in general. And I think I got that out of Red, White, and Royal Blue, whereas this feels very just juvenile. It feels very high school. And that's how it should feel, because that is the target audience. I'm not the target audience anymore. That was a real rude awakening. Also, what the fuck is up with the carnival being the cast party? I know personally, I was in plays like cast party. It wasn't just a party. There were specific things that had to happen in a cast party. There are certain traditions that, are passed down from person to person, from class to class. And none of those happened. I don't know if I just had I went to a really weird high school and we just did like really weird things, but the cast party, certain things have to happen. Also, I felt like Simon was very like hung up about his sexuality and like telling people. I understand there's a reason for that. He's in Georgia, which isn't exactly the friendliest place. Not all places in Georgia. He knows, and he says in the book that they're like the most liberal people in like all of Georgia or whatever. So I was just like, then why are you so afraid? And like, I get it, coming out isn't always easy. I remember my coming out like experience, coming out to my parents, you know, I cried. It was it's hard to tell them, but you know, I knew that, you know, my parents weren't gonna kick me out. I think that one gets like a 4, and that's it. I need to end this video because I need to go to sleep. That was it for me. I felt like I'd lost a bunch of momentum. And I'm very grateful for having the Summer of Contemporary readathon, because I felt like that was the jolt I needed this past week to help me get through more books and get me back on my normal reading pace and reading track. I'm very excited for July. I have lots of reading planned for July because, yeah. I completely forgot what I was talking about.